Hi there. In a previous video, I was showing how I can take a character turnaround that I've drawn in Sketchbook Pro and create these as my modeling templates in Maya. So in the previous video, I showed how I use Sketchbook Pro, which really can apply to any software that can save out each panel, and then place them in a new Maya project. So if you don't know how to create a Maya project, you can check out a video I created about creating projects in Maya to create this folder structure. You don't need all the folders necessarily, but if I'm creating a big project, it's helpful for these folders to be created and for Maya to know each one and what they're going to contain. So I have my empty scenes directory. I don't have a scene yet, but I did create the directory so I can bring these images into Maya. So you'll notice that each one I've got a front, a back, and a side, and I'm going to use these in image panes in Maya. So I'm going to switch over to Maya where I have a brand new scene, and I'm going to make a couple settings before I get going. So the first thing to point out, the scale in Maya can be changed, and depending on your workflow and what you're going to be doing with this, there's a few things that you might want to know to set up your model. So if you go to Windows and then Settings and Preferences, and then you're going to go to Settings, and you're going to see where it says centimeters. So right now, the scale in Maya is set to centimeters. So I'm going to actually switch this over to meters. For people who are working on models for a game, this might be compatible more with the game engine that you're using or the workflow that you're working in. So I'm going to then scroll out of here just so we can kind of see this, right? So now you can see the scale is a bit bigger. So when I create a new object, say I just kind of create a cube, and I go over to Polycube, if I got the attribute editor open and I go to the Polycube, you'll notice it's 1 by 1 by 1, right? So that cube right now is 1 meter. So I'm going to hit F, and I'm going to dolly out of this a little bit. So now we can tell that each one of these squares is 1 meter. So another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Display, and I'm going to go to Grid, and I'm going to go to the option box. Now in the option box, it's going to say that right now the length and width, right now since it's set to meters, this is 12 units. So right now since the units is set to meters, it's at 12 meters. So this whole grid right here is 12 meters by 12 meters. There are grid lines every 5 units. And the subdivisions are at 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the subdivisions to something that stands out a little bit more. These are going to be these subdivisions, so it's going to be 5 per meter. And then if I click Apply and Close, you're going to see that right now the solid line here is the middle, and these gray lines right here are the divisions, and then these are the subdivisions. So there's going to be 5 per. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that cube. I'm going to go to Create and Free Image Plane. And what this is going to do is it's going to set up a plane for me to add these images to, and then I'm going to go ahead and apply and close. But you notice it's pretty small. So instead of just hitting R for scale and scaling that up, which is totally possible for you to do, I'm going to keep my attribute editor open, and I'm going to go down to where it says image name, and I'm going to click the folder for that. And then in the open dialog box, I'm going to choose either my front, side, or back. So right now I'm going to choose the front because I want this to be the front view. And then I'm going to click open. Now in that, I'm going to scroll down. This is that image plane. I'm going to scroll down. It's going to say right now the coverage is 1024 by 1024, which is what I set my image size to. And then I'm going to set this width to 1 and the height to 1. And you'll notice that it just kind of scales up. Now, if I set this to, say, 6, just by 6, this is going to be a 6 meter square. So you notice that this supposedly is 6 meters, which is really a tall human to be modeling. So if I go down to, let's say, 2 meters, so that's going to be about 6 feet. And then notice that the grid is still quite large for that. I'm going to go to Display, Grid, go to the Grid Options, where it says it's 12 meters across this entire grid, which I really don't need something that size. So I'm going to choose 5 for length and width. So that's going to be 5 meters for the grid. And then there'll be grid lines. I don't want it to be 5 units. I want it to be 1 unit. And then subdivisions every one. And you'll see when I click Apply and Close that this will be a little bit better for my modeling. So I'm going to leave it at 2. Now this image center, notice how the image is centered, or the plane is centered on the grid. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into, this is X, Y, and Z, and in the Y, I'm going to go up half of the height. So if I enter 1, you'll notice now that plane is right there on the bottom of the grid. So now I can just press W and move this if I want. I can actually hit X on the keyboard and have it snap to the grid line. So I'm going to snap it there, right? And then I'm going to do another one. Again, create free image plane, and I'm going to go to the option box, and I'm going to go ahead and reset these settings and apply and close. Again, I'm going to go to the height and width. Now, there is a placement here. I can go to this size and this size, but this placement extras, the height in which works a little bit better in my opinion. So again, 2 by 2, and then I'm going to set this to 1. Scroll back up, go to the image name, click the folder icon, and then I'm going to select side and open. For some reason, it didn't keep my height and width, so I'm going to go back and enter 2 by 2. Could have been some mistake that I made there. I'm going to switch to, I'm going to go ahead and select that. Just make sure that I don't have anything selected in my window. I'm going to hit E on the keyboard. If I hold down J and rotate this, it's going to snap rotate it till I'm 90 degrees. I could just set that by going to the image plane and setting this to 90 degrees, but sometimes it's easier just to hold down J because it'll snap. Now I'm going to press W on the keyboard and I can move it again. I can hold down X and it'll snap it to the grid lines. Now I'm going to do one more. Select, go to Create Free Image Plane. I don't necessarily have to go to the option box, but I'm going to apply and close. Again, you could just go to Create and Free Image Plane. You don't have to go to the option box. I just show you that that's an option. Again, I'm going to click the folder icon, which brings up the open window again. And now I need the back. So I already had the front, the side, and now the back. And I'm going to open that. Again, scroll down to the bottom, set that to 2 by 2. It's set to maintain aspect ratio, so that was, I was actually entering it twice, but you only need to enter it once. And then set this one to 1. And again, I'm going to hold down X and have that snap to the grid. And now I'm going to do that again. I can set it right there so they're all equal distance apart. And now I can actually start modeling from these image planes. So I could just take a cube and I can look at that in terms of starting out my character with a cube. I could do it with a sphere. I can do it with a lot of different, there's a lot of people that start building models out of cubes, and I'm going to kind of use this same idea. So one cool thing about when you create construction objects in Maya is that you have a couple nodes here in the attribute editor. This pcube1, when I first created it, this is the transform. This is what moves it around in space. So translate and rotate and scale. This is the mesh inside of that. So these have a translate, that has a translate, but this one has a mesh, and outside of that is this polycube. And this is the construction history of that cube. So I can go in and I can make it higher. I can make it 2 units wide, or what I really want is 2 units high, right? 2 meters at this point in time. And then I'm going to add some subdivisions. I'm going to go for 4 by 4 by 4. And you'll see that it adds additional geometry to my cube that was only 1 by 1 by 1 in terms of the subdivisions, right? So I've added more subdivisions to that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down D and V, and what this is going to do is it's going to move this pivot point, and I can move it all the way down to the bottom, and again hold X and pull up with the move tool, and what that's going to do is it's going to place it right there on the grid, right? So D moves the pivot point, V snaps to points, so V snaps to one of these points here. I can even snap it to a corner if I want, but I have it set all the way down here and usually in the center. Right, so that snaps it to a point, and then X will move it without holding D, because D moves the pivot point. I don't want to move the pivot point, I don't want to move this, but I want it to snap to the grid. So that's how that works. Right, so now I have a cube that's about the same size as my character. It's a little bit taller, but now I can start modeling it out. I can start looking at it in terms of how do I want to model this character out? How do I want to build them out from this cube, right? So what I could do is narrow the width of it, right? And actually, I've got it set so the depth is actually the width here. And then I can start looking at the orthographic views. So I'm going to go over here to the orthographics. You know, if I use the space bar, I can actually switch really quickly over to each one. Right, so I'm going to dolly out a little bit. Right, so that's my top view. And then if I hit the space bar again and roll the mouse over this view, hit the space bar again, then I've got a dolly out a little bit. Right, there's my back view. Right, now what I want to do is I want to actually look at the cube from behind here. So what I'm going to have to do, I mean, I could do a couple different things, but I can set it up where I can see the back of the cube with this not in the way. I'm going to switch over here to, this is my side view, right? And there's my cube with my side view behind it. So what I can do is I'm going to go to shading, and I'm going to go down to X-ray. And what that's going to do is it's going to show me the cube that I could look through, right? It's like an X-ray looking through this cube, right? And then I can start modifying points or faces, and I'm just going to go and block it out. So I'm right-clicking, and I'm going to go to Vertex. I can drag these vertices down, right? And I try to work in groups as much as possible, but I can just frame it out. Like, I don't need to get too specific about everything yet. I'm just going to try to get these points as close as I possibly can to where they need to be. Right? I want to start working in major groups here. I'm going to go back to object, vertex. And I'm going to bring this one out. And then come down. So I could just start blocking these things out. Now, I'm probably going to get rid of some of this geometry. I might keep some of it. It really depends on what I'm shooting for in the end model here. But this will let me kind of at least get started in terms of making a basic shape, right? And then I've got the shoe down here. And I'll probably make a lot of modifications, but I'm going to spacebar out of here. I'm going to go over to this view, and I'm actually going to, let's go here, and I can actually drag this over. I'm actually going to, let me move it over on the other side so I can actually, for right now, I just want to see through it. And I'm going to spacebar here, select my object, and then go to shading, and then again X-ray. And now I can start looking at it and go to vertex, and I can start bringing these in. Now I could just go to R, which is scale, and scale all these kind of points in if I want to, right? That's one way to work as well. I don't have to, especially since it's going to be the same sort of a mirror on each side, I can do that. And I can bring this in and scale that in, bring this in, scale that in, because I'm kind of duplicating it. I'm kind of mirroring it on either side, right? And then I have a basic shape of it. It's not going to be perfect, but I have the basic shape mapped out. And I'm going to go back to object mode, and then I can hit F on the keyboard and frame that up. And now I can see that I have a somewhat basic shape. I'm going to keep working on that. I have some lines that I kind of squeezed in a little bit too much, and I can see that there. And I can kind of fix these things by going in and I'll right click and go to vertex, and I can dolly into this, go over here to this side, just kind of work, hold down shift and then W, and I'm going to move that back. Now another thing that can kind of help you, because this is going to be symmetrical to start out with, and I can start building details after that, is I can go to the move tool and I can change its options. I'm going to just double click. These are all the tools over here. This is when I press Q on the keyboard, that brings up select, right? And then this is move tool. So if I double click the move tool, I'm going to get these tool options. And in the tool options, I can go down to where it says symmetry settings, and I can turn it on. And where I've got this right now, you can see the red right here is the X, the green is the Y, the yellow is the Z. And if I move this out of the way, you can kind of see it here, right? So that X is moving to the side. So I want to go to symmetry object X. And now I'm going to close that. And when I do that, when I move one, you'll see it moves it on the other side, which is a great way to work when you're dealing with symmetrical objects, right? So I can kind of select that. There's a couple other techniques that I can kind of show that sort of help out. And one is if I need to select an entire line, I'm going to go to edge. I'm going to also press Q on the keyboard, so I'm not on the move tool right now. If I double click that entire line, it selects the entire edge. I can also right click, go to vertex. If I select one point here and I come over here and I double click, or I hold down shift and double click that, it's going to select all the points in between. That's another good way of selecting multiple vertices. So I could select that one, come down here, hold down shift, double click, and it's going to select those. It's still mirroring, so it's selecting them on the other side. So it's another good way to kind of work. You can also go to, say, edge. I can select that edge. And then if I select shift and double click that one, I'll select all those edges in between there. If I just double click the edge, again, it selects the entire loop, and I can move the entire loop. But I find that those are kind of helpful little tips to select multiple ones rather than just one at a time. And now I can just kind of modify this as I kind of go along to make sure that I'm getting the right shape that I need. I always want to kind of compare what I've got going on here in the model, right? A couple other things that you might want to know to kind of get you started is there's a modeling toolkit. And if you go over here to the tab way over on the side, it's actually up here as well. You can select this. You can bring up this modeling toolkit. There's a couple things that really kind of help out. One is a multi-cut tool, which if I come over here and I drag this around, I can see actually where it's at between that point to that point. So I'm going to put that about, let's say 46, and then I can come over here and it's going to connect a line between that. Right? So that's one good way to create not necessarily a full loop, but I can start with one, and then I can actually complete that. If I hit return, I can actually do another one. I can select here, and then I can come over to here, and it's going to connect the two because, again, I'm working in symmetry. So there's a few things to kind of get you going. There's also another good tool is the extrude tool. I'm going to come over here. What I would really want to do is use the multi-cut tool to kind of start here, come over to here, and then I'm going to hit enter, And then I'm going to base this on about where the arms would be. I'm going to go ahead and press Q on the keyboard to get out of the multi-cut tool. I'm going to select a face. If you're not in face mode, you can right click and go to face. And then I'm going to go to extrude. And then on extrude, what's going to happen is you're going to see that you get this little option window that allows you to change the offset, add divisions. But I can pull this out to start working on some arms if I wanted to. And you can actually increase the number of divisions. So let's say I go to 5 divisions, right? I can always add them later, but that's one quick way to do it. It's kind of one good way to kind of start getting you're moving a little bit, right? And I can taper it, and then I can modify it later. One last thing you're going to want to do is save this scene when you're done. So I'm going to go to File, I'm going to go to Save Scene. Since I'd already set my project, you're going to see it takes me right to this scenes directory, right? So I went ahead before I set this up and I originally created the project. And again, if you don't know how to create a project in Maya, I have another video that relates to that. But if you need to set it, you can click Set Project, and it brings up another window that's called Set Project, and you can choose whatever project you want. I could click Set. Again, it's going to take me right to the scenes directory. I can choose it right here, and I'm going to call my character Bob for whatever reason, and I'm going to make sure I save it as a Maya ASCII. Now, you can save it as a Maya binary, which makes it a smaller file, but a Maya ASCII it'll save it all as code and it won't be compressed. It'll make a larger file, but if something goes wrong, you could actually edit it. If you're concerned about file sizes and don't really care about modifying the code, you can save it as a Maya binary. And then I'm going to go ahead and click Save As. I'll be following up this video with another one to make improvements to this model, but I'm going to leave it right there for now. That at least would get you going with modeling in Maya and setting up the image planes and start to model from those image planes. I hope this helps.